Everyone's got a story. What's yours? We all live in stories, and we all live on stories. Stories of quests for truth and seeking to right wrongs. Stories of fearsome monsters and facing up to them together. Stories of our lives and stories of this world we live in. Is your story a hopeful story? We think it can be.
Hello there and welcome to tonight's event in Story. It is both sad and exciting tonight as we've reached our final event. Over the last fortnight we've been asking the question, everybody's got a story, what's yours? And we've been thinking about the stories that make and shape us and what they tell us about ourselves and the world. We've been especially investigating how life's big stories connect with the Christian faith and asking what difference the person of Jesus might make to our own stories. I'm Hannah and I'm going to be leading us through the event tonight. I'm a first year theologian studying at Newnham who cannot wait to get back to Cambridge and eat some Aromi pizza on King's Parade. If you've joined us over the past fortnight, then you know that we've been thinking about the archetypal plots that drive our stories and draw us in. Our final theme tonight is rebirth, though perhaps we might more commonly refer to it as transformation. And it's everywhere, from TV home makeover programs, some of my personal favourites, to Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, Shrek, The Frog Prince, Beauty and the Beast. In our lives, I guess we see it most in January when we make resolutions and wonder who we'll be by the time next year rolls around. Whether change is possible or not is the question that Pete will be considering when he speaks to us shortly. Pete's been speaking across the last fortnight, so maybe you've heard him before. If not, let me introduce you. Pete lives in Leeds and works with university Christian unions across the country. He loves stories and we've loved hearing from him as he unravels why they make us tick. Pete will speak for about 25 minutes or so, but before he does that, we're going to hear from Shane about his incredible story of a life transformed. So over to Dan, who sat down with Shane earlier on.
Hi, Shane. It's really good to see you. Where are you calling us from?
Middlesbrough. Smoggy Land, gets nicknamed.
Are you there with your family? Like, what's your situation?
Yeah, so I've got my wife and 5 kids. So, yeah, it's fun.
All under age 12 with homeschooling. Like, what's that like, man? It's
can't wait for school to open. That's all I'll say.
How would you describe, like, I guess your children's upbringing compared to your own? Because you had like a much rougher time. Maybe you can talk about like what life was like for you as a child.
So life for me as a child was just obviously when I was really, really young. I had carrot ginger hair, so I was living on a rough estate, so I'd always just get picked on and bullied off everybody. That's all I remember, and getting chased home. And I was always scared. I always felt like if someone was bigger than me or older than me, it meant they were harder than me.
Yeah.
So if someone bigger than me hit me, I would just stand there, cry and run home, and just that was my life. And my mum was the kind of woman who, bless her, if she doesn't know any different really. If you went in the house and told me mum or someone's just like punched me or I've just been hit, and you went and cry, and you'd get a clip across the head, chucked back out, and told go and fight them back, you little girl. Do you know what I mean? So I was just brought up in that sense. I was loved, got what I wanted really. I wasn't, it wasn't in a bad. There was stuff, but it wasn't bad as in the sense of anything really bad. But it was just more like feeling like a black sheep all the time, feeling like I didn't fit in, just feeling the oddball, really, getting picked on off everybody, and just not feeling like I could turn to anyone, really. Because if, like I say, if I turned to my mum, I'd get a clip and told I'm soft and man up, basically. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
whereas my kids,
Yeah, I got your mum being quoted as just like not having any control on you when you got a little bit older, like no matter what she did. So this was like a little bit later on. Can you talk about, burgling houses, pinching cars is an expression I've heard you use quite a lot.
yeah,
Like, what does that
yeah,
actually look like? Yeah.
I just went in with the wrong crowd because they didn't bully. Even though they bullied me, I didn't get as bullied as much, and so I just went in with them, and they were all just the local thieves and used to burgle houses, steal cars, creep houses, while they're in the house. Through the day, we would just literally, slowly. I remember times when we'd slowly like try and open the doors and sneak in, and the people would be sat in the front room watching the telly, and we'd be creeping in and creeping upstairs and pinching purses, pinching things. Joyriding in the early 90s up in the northeast of England was a big thing. It died down after a while, but it was huge. Everyone, like, it was a status to take the biggest car chase, and the helicopters would be out. There'd be 20 cars behind every corner. They had a police car, and the lads would all be driving past. And this is what I remember, my first thing where I probably got the wrong impression of what it was. They were like little celebrities, if you had a big, massive car chase and everyone knew who it was.
Yeah.
Everyone would talk about it. And I remember being at the school. I was only young. I mean, at the outside of the shops. I remember this car just slowly going past with about four lads hanging out the windows, chucking things with lines of police cars behind them and just pulling up. And the police cars stopping and the helicopter out and everyone cheering them on in their estate. And I just thought, oh, wow, yeah, I want to do that, because it was like, they were like celebrities. So I would go off and start pinching little metros and stuff, because that's all I could pinch at the time.
Yeah.
Because I was only young, so the steering locks and stuff.
Yeah.
They're very hard to get. So we just went down that route, really. Really burgling. And I'm talking about the age of 11 or 12 here as well.
One of your teachers was a guy called Andy Smith, and he described like you as this kind of monster child at the age of 12, like with the desire to kill, like just quoting him like that, this child, he just had hatred and bitterness to his core, even at the age of 12. And he crops up a bit later in your story, I know, from like when you're in prison. But I guess like at this time in your life, if someone asked you about like what you thought about the person of Jesus, like what would be your response to like someone who asked you that?
I'd have laughed. I'd have laughed because there was no such thing. It was a fairy tale. It wasn't real. It just didn't exist to me at the time. I was an atheist, didn't believe in it, I'd never been around it, to be truthful. Never really stepped in a church. In fact, sorry, I'm telling a lie. I probably did once or twice when I burgled one. And one time when I remember sneaking in and pinching all the collection. They do a collection at the end, and we snuck past the pastor and we pinched all the collection and ran back out laughing and chased us. We thought it was funny. The only time I ever stepped into a church at that point. Never heard anyone preaching, really. Heard possibly at that point I'd heard about God and Jesus, but didn't know anything other than a religious side to it. In the sense of that they're goody two shoes with the sandals on and the long hair and the beards. That's what I used to view. Christians to me at the time was just them geeky people who had like big long beards. They had like cords on and a Bible in the hand and hello, we believe in Jesus. Oh, get away from me, idiot. That was the kind of mentality.
Just weirdos,
just weirdos. And I would never, ever have imagined what I'm doing right now if you told me that. Never. I'd have just laughed.
So from Ellamore Hall and that period of your life, can you explain a little bit about kind of how you started basically to spiral out of control and then eventually ended up, with your being on the run with your 2 attempted murders? So like, how do we start going from this point where you have this really disturbed child who no one can control, and how do you start really going off the rails from there?
Do you know how I was saying a bit earlier? I think I was mentioning that I was the oddball and felt like the odd one out all the time. I just didn't fit in with anyone, no matter where I was. And when I had my first little fight with somebody, I remember people giving me a bit of attention, and I thought, oh yeah, I like this. This is what I want, and that was it. But that from then on, I was game, as they call it in the criminal world. I was super game. I'd have a fight with someone, I'd stab people, and I just started getting a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a nutter, and he wouldn't back down. Nothing at that, how it led to at that point. And then I just remember started watching some gangster films. One of them's called Goodfellas. It's about the mafia. I was no gangster, but when you're a young kid and you've got a stupid mind and you think you're something you're not, that's what I was. And I started watching gangster films, but there's a bit in the film where he's in Goodfellas where they've got a man in the boot who they were killing, but he's still alive. So they open the boot up and he starts stabbing him in the boot. And my hair started to stand on end. And I thought, yeah, I want to kill people. And obviously that's not the right way to think. That's mental health. And so these videos I would watch constantly over and over again and get adrenaline rush. And then I thought, sack it. No, I want people to fear me. I want people to walk around the street and turn across the road when they see me. And then I used to think, how do you get someone who's really tough, who you know can beat you in a fight? How can you get them to fear you? And then I just thought, you have to just be an out-and-out total killer, not care whether you get life in prison, not care what you do, and not care if you get killed. And I just went into that careless mentality.
Like gave up on life, just went for it.
Yeah, and I just straight in, head deep, and I would just, someone cross me, knife out, boom, stab them. Became the real, because you get a lot of people walk the streets with knives. Their intention's never to kill. They carry them for protection. They're not killers. I know that sounds crazy, even though they might have killed someone, but the reality is 9 times out of 10, they didn't go out, set out to kill someone. They got themselves into a ruck or a fight, and basically ended up pulling a knife out, stabbing them, ran off, panicked because now they're on the run for murder, and then they've got to go to jail and put the front on. But reality is, it wasn't intended. It was different for me. It was intended. I just loved it. I was out there and became known as the real deal, basically. If I'm going to pull a knife out and try and kill you with it, I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to. And so I basically, it led to me pulling going to Hartlepool. There was a local handy, crazy lad there. And I basically he ran up to me. We're in the middle of the town centre, brought it to a standstill in the middle of the road. He pulled out a hammer, smashed me across the head. As he did that, I pulled out a 9-inch kitchen blade. It was sort of like together, and I stabbed him 4 inches in his head. It went in there and come out there. He basically, the knife handle snapped off, and he basically carried on chasing after us. But by now, the police, everyone's shouting police because you can hear the sirens, and everyone just scattered, and we went. I'm now on the run for attempted murder. Later on, while on the run, I then went into Pete Lee in County Durham, walked into a local pub. I used to sell ecstasy tablets at the time, which is drugs, and walked into the club, and someone pulled me up, and about a lie was said, and they got involved, but the lie was deliberately said to get them involved. And I thought, oh yeah, sack it. So I told them to get outside. I was going to kill him. And when he come outside, I just stuck a 9-inch kitchen blade straight through his chest. Nearly, if he didn't move, the police say, if he didn't move the way he did, it probably would have went straight through his heart and killed him.
That's just because he kind of pulled you up in the middle of the pub and like tried to challenge you, and you're just like, having none of that. No one's going to speak to me that way.
Yeah,
is that with the mentality?
It was the mentality was when I sat down to talk, like he sat me down, he was like getting involved, and I went to explain myself. And I remember looking to the side and seeing that everyone was looking, and I just instantly got this feeling, wait there a minute, he's just pulled me up. if I don't do anything here, it's going to look like he's pulled me up. I've backed down, and then it looks like I've backed down, and you can't have that. So I thought, no, I'm going to make an example. I'm going to have to make an example of him now, so everyone on the street knows you can't pull me up like that. So I basically, that's why I did it. I made an example to the streets.
I get what you mean. Yeah. So you end up in prison. Yeah. You end up in prison from these 2 attempted murderers, after being on the run for like a period of time. I guess like if we skip ahead forward, because I know there are like a couple of instances where you like attack prison guards and stuff like that, and you end up in the CSC. I feel like if you explain what the CSC, it kind of gives everyone listening kind of a feeling of like, I guess you just gave up on life and like how dangerous you were. Would you mind describing how you were treated in that?
So the CSC it's called the closed supervision circuit. And it's sort of like, it's a stages you go through. In the end, you can end up on a unit and stuff like that. But the stages, you can also be on CSC in the segregations, where you're just going from segregation to segregation, and they just leave you in the seg for years and years. And but basically the process is this: your cell door isn't, so you're basically segregated in a maximum security prison, which is a normal segregation, and then you're segregated from segregation. That sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you're in a top security prison, you're segregated off, then you're segregated off from the segregation. It's like an extra layer of protection, basically. Your cell door has like a hatch on it, a metal hatch, what can be locked and unlocked at the bottom. And so if your cell door's to get open, there has to be 6 to 7 prison officers in riot gear, possibly sometimes more, depending on how you're kicking off or if you're being normal on the day. When they feed you, you get 1 hour out yourself to the exercise, and that is going through the process. When they feed you through a hatch. They'll get like a metal box. They'll attach it to the door, unlock one side, put the food in, lock it, and unlock the other side. And that's it. There's no physical contact, basically. And that's how it is. That's your life. And you get out your cell. And sometimes you're meant to get out your cell, but it depends on how you are. So if you're playing up that day, you're not getting out your cell. So sometimes you're banged up for 24 hours a day, and you never get out your cell. And even then, when the cell door opens, I'd battle them and fight them. And
if we go on now, like I know there's a couple of moments that kind of challenged you while you're in prison. Could you like briefly talk about like? I know there's one guy who you met who was in prison for life and was a Christian, and you thought was crazy. Can you just briefly like tell us about that?
Yeah, so he's called either Robert Bull or Ronald Bull, and he was an old man at the time. So, I don't know where he is now, but I just remember I started selling drugs, heroin on the wing, and putting a few hits on officers and doing stuff with heroin. And I would just stand on the top landing and watch. And I just remember this old bloke coming up to me and start trying to tell me about Jesus and stuff like that. And I just remember thinking, what a plonker, get away from me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he would just every now and then come up to me and just try and preach Jesus to me. I even remember getting a bit annoyed at him at one point and saying, look, unless God appears to me physically like you are right now, I'm never going to believe, so get yourself on your way. But to his little work, obviously Jesus had a different plan, didn't he? So he'd keep coming, he'd keep saying little things, and little why Jesus leaflets come flying through my door. I'd have little glimpse through them, and I guess something, because I don't believe, at this minute anyway, I don't believe that nothing doesn't go in there, no seeds are planted. So when I was reading these little things, some of it might have been kicked in, but I didn't know at the time. And I just remember one time, he come up to me, and he got my attention, but it wasn't because I understood him. It was because I didn't understand what he was saying. And it was this, I remember him getting my attention, pointing to his heart, and he said, I'm never, ever going to get out of prison again, possibly, but I'm free. And my logic at the time, if you're in prison for life, how can you be free? You're in prison for life. That's not freedom. And so it puzzled me. I don't know why, it just made me go off and think, how is he free? What on earth is he on about? I just couldn't understand what he was saying. But I carried on in that was the beginning. And then I carried on in my criminal life, and I got sent to the segregation unit for subversive behaviour and selling drugs in the prison. Went to the segregation unit, and to cut all that short, in a sense, I ended up getting chucked out of that prison because I went on a dirty protest and kicked off again. And so they sent me back to, I think it was Long Lartin in Worcestershire.
Yeah.
Top security prison.
Is Long Lartin where you had the Alpha course?
Yeah. It was, yeah.
Tell us about that.
And then I just basically, I went there, and within a couple of weeks, they opened my door and said education. And so remember, at this point, I'm still a bit puzzled and wondering what he means, but I did write him a letter, that prisoner who I've just said, before I actually got moved. Forgot to say this, and I wrote my letter about, I don't know why, I've got an image and a vision of you in my head, hope you're doing all right. Sent the letter, and he sent me a 10-page letter back. Jesus will set you free, and he'll turn your heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And I just thought, what on earth is he on about? But this stuff was planting in. This was little things that God probably is doing. So when I go to this prison, they opened my cell door. I'm in a top security prison now, and they opened my cell door and said, go to education. So I opened the cell door, went down to the education department, and when I got there, I got to the other end, and my name wasn't on the list. So the prison officers were like, you're going to have to go back to your cell. And I was like, made a real big fuss over it. And I must have done one of the heads in. Oh, God had a different plan, obviously. But, at the time, I'd have thought, I must have got on the nerves, because one of the officers stepped back, and he said, go to the chaplaincy. And I was just buzzing because I thought, I'm getting out my cell. I don't have to go back to my cell. I'll go to chaplaincy. So I went there and I walked in the chaplaincy room, and I thought to myself, I remember seeing a TV playing with this posh grey-haired guy on, and he would be talking, hello, all that, posh words and stuff. I now know him to be Nicky Gumbel, obviously, but at the time I didn't. I just saw a posh grey-haired guy. And a circle of lads all circled around watching this video, and I sat down on the spare seat, what was there, and I just remember thinking, oh no, it's a Christian thing, how am I going to get out of this? So obviously, for people, because some people might think, well, obviously it's a Christian thing, you're going into church, but in church, it's not, everything's not always used for church in the prison, if you know what I mean. You can use it for all sorts of things.
Sure.
So I'm sat there, and I just thought, right, as soon as this video's finished, because I didn't want to get up and disturb everyone, I felt uncomfortable just sitting down. So I was thinking, when the video's finished, I'll get up and I'll go. So as soon as the video finished, this little woman sat forward, little Alice, and she went, are you meant to be here? And I was like, oh, I don't know. She said, oh, what's your name? Checked, my name wasn't on the list. I said, oh, buzzing, I'll go. That was my excuse. I was like, see you later, lads. Went to get up, and one of the lads whispered to me, went, you get free strawberry gatos and biscuits and stuff. I went, miss, can you put my name down, please? So she went, you know what, I will. And she put the name down, and that is how I started going on Alpha. But isn't it weird, because if you think about it, I wasn't searching for God, or I didn't think I was searching for God at the time. It was God coming to me, and it was God doing things to put me in specific places. It's mad. It's how did I even end? I shouldn't even have been think about this. My door shouldn't have been opened.
Yeah.
Sent me to education. Then when I get to the other end, my name's not on the list. They should have sent me back to my cell. Yeah. And of all the timings that day could have happened, there's an Alpha course on.
Yeah.
And it's just, I didn't ask to do any of that. I didn't know an Alpha course existed. I didn't know I was going to be sent into the chaplaincy. I just got sent to the education department, but God had a different plan. And I didn't know at the time. And I'm on this course, and I just started to go on the course. And when I was on the course, I would just go in. And for me, at the time, it was just, loved a good debate. Loved saying, look, you're all rubbish. But what I remember is sometimes when people are not religious, but really passionate about the faith, sometimes get a bit heated, when you talk to people and they're saying, oh, God's not real. And, my past experiences were, you'd end up like debating with them heatedly. And it was a bit of a shock because I would try and say all sorts of nasty stuff, and they'd just be like, "Oh yeah, that's great. We respect your opinion." And I was like, "Eh? I want an argument. Come on!" But I couldn't get an argument. But then, while I'm on the course, I'm hearing things I've never heard before. You see, like I told you before.
Yeah.
I've seen the religious side. All you've ever heard is the religious, good people, bad people, and obviously, if there is a God, I'm evil, so I'm going to hell anyway. But I start to hear things like there's nothing you can do in life that God can't forgive you for. As long as you have a repentant heart and ask for forgiveness, your sins can be forgiven no matter what you've done. And I couldn't, do you know when someone's being drummed in your head a certain way all the time, that I couldn't grasp it? It was like, But I didn't know that's what God was like. I thought you had to be good and perfect. And they were like, no. And they would give me scriptures and no one's righteous, not one. And and I would be like, whoa, I've never heard this before. And so that was a little thing. Well, at the time, I didn't think. I just thought it was being argumentative and being funny. But when I look back on it now, it was God just opening my mind to the real gospel, what I'd never heard before. I just heard religion, and that. So anyway, I'm being opened up like that. And then they have a day they dedicate where they pray for you and the Holy Spirit and stuff. And nothing, to me, it was just like, oh yeah. And there was a big build up to it as well, So you're there getting a bit excited. And when nothing happens, you're like, oh, see, I told you it's rubbish. But anyway, they did the praying on the day. Nothing happened to me. I do remember one or two people crying and stuff. But now it happened to me, and I just remember feeling disappointed and thinking, yeah, see, all absolute rubbish, man. They're all just going along with you. And anyway, I went to the side, started making the coffee. And when I started making the coffee, the pastor, Eddie Baker, he's dead now, rest in peace. Eddie Baker, he came to me and he just, he said, I've never done this in all the years I've worked here, but God is telling me to tell you to come here this afternoon. And I thought, yeah, get out my cell again. So the afternoon comes, they open my cell door, so you must have put my name down for chaplaincy, or they wouldn't have opened my door. I went down, had to find them. I found Eddie. Eddie took us into the chaplaincy bit, and they opened you got two chairs facing towards, as if we were sat towards each other. And he said, right, I'm going to say some scriptures out the Bible. I'm going to give you a little explanation, and then we'll pray. And I just remember him saying one verse very clearly: no one's righteous, not one. We all fall short of the glory of God. Now, my guess is, because I was always quizzing him and saying things like, how can you be forgiven no matter what? Them scriptures are around no matter what you've done, basically. No one's righteous. We can all be forgiven, kind of thing. And then the other one was on Jesus. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the reason why I remember it was about Jesus is because from that he explained the gospel dead quick. That was sinners, and God came, and Jesus was sent to die on the cross for our sins. Yeah. And I just remember hearing that, and then I remember him praying, and then I remember him saying, right, pray. And I just remember sitting there, and I remember thinking, pray? Well, what do you do? Well, what do I say? And I just remember hearing him saying, from your heart, just mean what you're saying and pray. And I found myself saying, God, if you're real, please come into my life. I hate who I am. I hate who I've become. Please just show me something. And I remember saying other stuff, but I rabbled on a bit after that, and I can't remember everything what was said then. Yeah. And we'd actually stopped praying, and the prayer was over, and we just sat back and just started chatting. And as we're chatting, I started to feel an energy feeling in my stomach. And this feeling started to raise up. And I stopped talking because I thought, what's going on? What's this? And as the feeling rose up, it just shot up this feeling. And I just uncontrollably cried my eyes out. And it gets me a little upset here because it is the moment my life took a huge turn. And it's 11 years, and it still gets that little a bit of a tear sometimes. It still emotionally affects me, because at that very point when that happened to me, my life changed. Like I say, I'm not professing I've been totally perfect since for 11 years. I've had my mistakes. I've had to grow. I've had to learn. I've had times when I fell a bit and stuff like that. But in a whole, my life has gone from one extreme to the other. And I just remember from then becoming that mad Christian. I just ran on the wing, and I was just. This is funny actually, but I remember, if you're known for attacking officers, you've got to know who you are.
Yeah.
So in a top security prison, they've got in a top security prison, the officers stand in groups. So when movements are happening, they can defend each other if anything happens. Because it's not just me who attacks officers in prisons like that. It's a lot of different people. And so I remember running up to them with a Bible in my hand and jumping in front of them like that. And they've all sort of jumped back into a fighting stance. I went, it's real. And they were looking at each other like, what's he on about? I went, it's real. After about 3 or 4 times, one of them went, what's real? I went, Jesus Christ, he's real. And they all split up and walked off. And then I was just running around the wing, just preaching Jesus. I got nicknamed Dot Off EastEnders. I got nicknamed Bible Basher, God Squad, you name it. But at the time, I was like new to Christianity, and I was on fire, and I was just like, I'm suffering for Christ. So when people challenged me, I just seen it as like a great thing, because I'm suffering for the Lord and stuff. And I would just run around the jail preaching to everybody, and I'm not like that now. When I was first a Christian for years, I was just preaching to anyone who would take I think I overdid it. I think some people, after about 5 minutes, they're all like, "Oh, right, we've listened. You had my attention, but can I go now?" And I'd be still there an hour after, trying to explain the gospel to them and stuff. But it was an amazing turnaround, and my life just from then on took a huge, huge turn.
Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him,
Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today.
So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter,
He has gone to be the guest of a sinner.
But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord,
Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount.
Jesus said to him,
Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost.
Well, good evening to you all. I'm really glad that you can join us this evening. Over recent evenings, we've considered 3 of the 7 story plots that Christopher Booker says repeat across time and cultures. We thought about the quest of overcoming the monster and of tragedy. And if you've not yet seen those, then do catch up on them. But tonight, to finish the series, we're thinking about the theme of rebirth. And I believe it's appropriate that we finish here. For rebirth stories offer an alternative to stories of tragedy. The central character, who's normally hopelessly trapped in a dark state, is suddenly stirred to life again in stories of rebirth. A dramatic change occurs. Whole new vistas open as, in a sense, the old protagonist dies in order to be reborn. Sometimes rebirth occurs in the context of a fresh encounter with the world's ugliest realities. In A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge is transformed after being terrified by the ghosts of Christmas, past, present and future. In Skyfall, James Bond fakes his own death, and when he returns resurrected and ready for service. It's a new Bond that we meet. He's darker, more mature, more self-aware. In his real-life story of rebirth, Alexander Solzhenitsyn's rebirth occurred during horrific imprisonment in Soviet Siberia, which he describes in the Gulag archipelago. But more commonly, a protagonist is reborn as they are dramatically set free. Sleeping Beauty and Snow White are set free by the kiss of a handsome prince. In Beauty and the Beast, an arrogant prince is transformed into a hideous beast. And that's how he'll stay until he learns to love and be loved in return. Frozen's theme is that only true love can melt a frozen heart. And all of these stories illustrate how very often love is required to bring rebirth. Interestingly, in Frozen, this love isn't primarily romantic. In fact, and perhaps you'd expect me to say this, it's often a spiritual encounter, an encounter with the love of God that causes rebirth in these stories. I know, we might roll our eyes at the friend who's returned from their gap year, spiritual, claiming rebirth. We might be slightly disappointed by the cliche of it all. But it really is notable how a faith encounter, particularly an encounter with the love of God, is central to many rebirth stories. We heard a powerful real-life example tonight. Alexander Solzhenitsyn's rebirth also centered around hearing the Christian story from a man set to be executed the following day. My favorite fictional rebirth story, Les Miserables, turns as Jean Valjean encounters the love of God. And so here's the question I want us to consider. What is it about faith encounters that seems to carry such high potential for making us truly alive? Now, to grapple with this question, I want us to consider one further rebirth story. This one is described in chapter 19 of Luke's Gospel, the biography of Jesus that we've been using during story. As the chapter opens, Jesus is entering a city called Jericho, and Luke immediately tells us about a man named Zacchaeus that Jesus will meet there. And Luke gives us 3 details about Zacchaeus. He's a tax collector, he's wealthy, and he's short. That Jesus encounters a tax collector in Jericho fits with what we know about the day. When the Romans invaded Judea, they divided it into 4 areas, and then they insisted that duties be paid on goods that were carried across these borders. So Zacchaeus was employed by the Romans at Jericho, which was a border town, to collect customs duties just like these. But that made Zacchaeus a public hate figure. It's actually quite hard to encapsulate just how hated Zacchaeus would have been. He was in league with the enemy. He made his livelihood collecting taxes for the Romans. But hatred of tax collectors specifically focused on how personally very rich this endeavour made people like Zacchaeus. The Romans allowed tax collectors to collect more than the required amount and then to pocket the surplus themselves. Tax collectors did so gleefully and often very heartlessly. And because Jericho was itself a centre for the production and export of balsam, Zacchaeus would have become incredibly wealthy. You might think of how the French viewed collaborators with the Nazis during the Second World War. That is Zacchaeus. He's corrupt and greedy. He's a bottom-feeding bureaucrat. He's in bed with the enemy, and he is getting rich off his own people's misery. Do you know, a document from the time advises deep cleaning your house if a tax collector has been nearby. Luke gives us one further detail about Zacchaeus, that he's short. And at this we might simply laugh. But before we do, let's appreciate what this might have meant to Zacchaeus. The shame researcher Brené Brown has found that nearly all of us experience body shame. Nearly all of us harbour fears that our physical makeup prevents us from really belonging in a group. And we might fear that our height or our skin complexion or our hair or our smell marks us out in some way. She says virtually all of us have a complicated relationship with our bodies, and Zacchaeus did too. Indeed, Zacchaeus' lack of physical stature may have simply compounded his lot. The fact that he stood out both morally and physically would have probably made him into a pantomime villain figure. He was easy to spot, conspicuous, and so very easy to isolate and to despise. To most people, Zacchaeus would have just been that horrid little man, condemned by the hole that he dug, all by himself, acting out a script that would inevitably end in tragedy, and then constantly reminded of it by those who recognised him in the street and physically distanced themselves from him. Zacchaeus is loathsome, friendless, and hopeless. It's not actually that different from Jean Valjean early on in Les Miserables. Valjean has been unjustly imprisoned for 19 years, but prison has hardened him further. As he's released, Victor Hugo tells us he shakes his fist at a church. He's angry at society, and he's particularly angry at a God who seems so blind to his cause. But then, desperately hungry, Valjean is eventually led to the door of a local Christian bishop. As he knocks on the door, he's expecting to get the kind of welcome that the people of Jericho might have shown Zacchaeus. Yet instead, he is welcomed lavishly as an honoured guest. At one point, Valjean feels that he should explain to the bishop exactly who he is, but the bishop interjects. "No, you need not tell me your name," he says. "You are my guest. Your name is my brother." That night, Valjean is shown to a bed, the first he's slept in for 19 years. Imagine that. But like Zacchaeus, Valjean's nasty edge remains. Lying in the bed, he sees the bishop's generosity as an opportunity, and so decides to burgle him. He creeps downstairs. He steals 6 silver plates. And then worst of all, he bludgeons the kind bishop as he comes to investigate. And Valjean too is loathsome, friendless, and hopeless. But both the fictional Valjean and the real-life Zacchaeus are about to be reborn. For his part, Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is on the way, and like the crowd, Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus, but his combination of lack of stature and notoriety means that he must climb a tree if he's to see Jesus. What a picture. Here's how Luke describes what happened next. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Now, let's just pause here. What do we learn? Well, it turns out that Zacchaeus is known by Jesus. Jesus knows exactly who Zacchaeus is. But also, notice the honour that Jesus shows Zacchaeus. To Jesus, Zacchaeus isn't that horrid little man. Jesus respectfully uses Zacchaeus' name. Also, intriguingly, he addresses him while he's in the tree rather than at street level. The point is, Jesus speaks up to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus' lack of height would have meant that he spent his life being spoken down to by others. But now Jesus willingly places himself in the place of weakness for Zacchaeus. Then Jesus does something extraordinary. He requests hospitality from Zacchaeus. In Jesus' culture, even more than in ours, staying with someone indicated friendship, intimacy. So Jesus' words are an offer of friendship and acceptance to Zacchaeus. So Jesus knows exactly what Zacchaeus is like. He already knows his name. Yet he wants him as a friend. And for Zacchaeus, that changes everything. Zacchaeus climbs down and takes Jesus to his home, and soon he shows that he is a new person. "Look, Lord," he says in verse 8, "here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." It's remarkable, isn't it? Because to this point, nothing had been able to persuade Zacchaeus to change path. Not public cold shouldering, not his parents' pleas, not his nagging conscience. Now this simple invitation comes from Jesus, and Zacchaeus embarks upon a U-turn. Why? I think Zacchaeus illustrates how we are able to see a whole new way forward when we know that we're wanted just as we are. When you know you're wanted, it allows you to face ugly realities about yourself. It's from the safe place of being wanted that your wings can begin to unfurl. I think we're supposed to think that Zacchaeus had previously heard of Jesus' offer of forgiveness, of a fresh start. But he clearly always assumed that his die was cast, that his nasty record in the past and the present excluded him. But for that reason, he lacked the power to change the things in his life that were wrong. He was trapped. But as Zacchaeus experiences the welcome and affection of this man who went around acting and speaking as if he were God, then everything else falls into place. Conditional acceptance says, "I'll accept you when you're acceptable." That's clearly not what's going on here. Unconditional acceptance says, "I'll accept you and I don't care what you're like." And we might assume that this is what Jesus is offering Zacchaeus. Actually, it's more like how a dog treats its owner, simply oblivious to any faults that don't involve putting out food or going for walks. No, Jesus' acceptance of Zacchaeus is contra-conditional. He speaks with the authority of God and says, "Zacchaeus, I know exactly what you're like. I know the pain that you've caused others. I don't find it attractive. And I want you." And this melts Zacchaeus' heart, just as it melted the heart of Jean Valjean. Valjean, you might remember, stole 6 silver plates and beat up a bishop. That's quite a record. He's soon apprehended by the police and returned to the bishop's house. He expects a swift return back to prison, but what happens next is simply stunning. Behind closed doors, the bishop is encouraging his housemaid not to mourn the loss of the plates. "All I have belongs to the poor," he explains, "and if the poor need them, then no crime has been permitted." Then, to Valjean's shock, as the bishop comes out of his house, he greets him like an old friend and asks him in front of the watching authorities why he'd not also taken the silver candlesticks along with the plates, as if they were a gift. And with that, the police leave. They thought that Valjean was a robber, but now they think there is no case to answer. But Valjean is transformed by the words that the bishop then offers him. "Jean Valjean, my brother," he says, "you no longer belong to evil but to good. It is your soul that I buy back from you. I withdraw it from black thoughts and the spirit of perdition, and I give it to God." Conditional acceptance would have just sent Jean Valjean back to prison, still not accepted. Unconditional acceptance might have led the bishop to somehow adopt a willingly oblivious posture towards Valjean's crime. But the bishop wishes to relate to Valjean contra-conditionally. reflecting to him the very character of the one true God. This experience deeply penetrates Valjean's heart. He determines to live a life worthy of the contra-conditional acceptance, what the Bible calls grace, that he's received as a reality in his life. And the rest of the story really tells of the radical sacrifices that he continues to make for the sake of others. Hugh Jackman played Valjean in the movie adaptation of Les Miserables, describing the change in the character like this. Victor Hugo uses the word transfiguration. It's even more than a transformation, because Valjean becomes more like God. It's a spiritual change, something that happens from within. To me, it's one of the most beautiful journeys ever written, and I didn't take the responsibility of playing the role lightly. If I'm a tenth of the man that Jean Valjean becomes, I'd be a very happy man. Valjean becomes more like God, says Hugh Jackman. And we could say the same about Zacchaeus. Both are shown contra-conditional acceptance, grace, and a love that they know that they do not deserve, and it delivers them from tragedy, and it melts them forever. Now, I know we're not all Zacchaeus. We're not all Jean Valjean. We're not all Shane Taylor. And yet all of us know the voice of shame, which tells us that if the true us was to be revealed, we'd not be accepted. And it leaves us trapped. I was once in a workshop on shame. We were asked to sit in a circle, and each of us was given a post-it note and asked to write on it something else that no one else in the group knew about us. The group leader said that this was to be the kind of thing that maybe our best friend or our parent or our girlfriend or boyfriend didn't know about us. I remember my heart starting to thump, writing something down. We were then told to fold the post-it note over and to place it into our left hand. Our hearts were thumping all the more. What on earth was about to happen? Each of us was then asked to take the post-it note in our left hand and place it into the right hand of the person next to us. By this point, my heart was beating 1,000,000 times a minute. And as intended, the exercise was revealing deep shame. I was terrified of what might happen if my secrets were revealed. How would I stand before the group? Now, I'm glad to say that at that point we were allowed the notes back and we could do whatever we wanted with them. But do you see the point of the exercise? That voice of shame tells all of us that we don't belong as we really are. Each of us carries around details of our past and our present and imagine, if they were just made known, I wouldn't be accepted. I wouldn't be wanted anymore. Sometimes this shame relates to things that were done to us. Some relate to characteristics of our person, like body shame that we thought about earlier. But the reality is that much of our shame reveals things that we really have done, and perhaps even do, which deep down we know are truly shameful. That's why when Zacchaeus and Jean Valjean are loved and cherished and accepted just as they are in their shame, it becomes the very reality to them. Truly welcomed, it's as if their shame is burst. That's why then these paroxysms of generosity and kindness spill out of them to others, because they now see in others mirror images of themselves, and they long for others to know in their own stories of weary tragedy that same love and conditional acceptance and second chance. I wonder whether that's been your experience of being around followers of Jesus. I'm imagining that some of you are only watching tonight because, albeit imperfectly, you've sensed in a follower of Jesus this rare kind of kindness and love and welcome. But these friends would tell you in a heartbeat that any of this is only because they've themselves been welcomed by the man who is God, who knows what they're like, who's met them in their shame, and who's won their hearts. And so may I ask, can you imagine what it would feel like to be truly loved by the one true God who knows everything about you and yet who wants you? Can you see how this would bust your shame? How it might set you free? You might be saying, well, listen, I would love this to be true. But how can I count on this welcome? And how do I know that this isn't just wish fulfillment? The answer to both of these questions centers on Jesus' death and resurrection. Jesus' invitation is consistent, even to the most shame-filled. Come as you are, all are welcome. But just as the bishop had to pay for Valjean's redemption through giving up his silver plates, there was a cost for Jesus to pay for our welcome too. And it was in dying that Jesus paid this very cost. As he hung on a Roman cross, Jesus' clothes were torn, his body was exposed, he was spat at by passers-by. It's as if Jesus is embodying the shame that is rightly ours toward a good God. And yet at this very moment, Jesus is willingly taking the punishment that we deserve upon his own shoulders. He bears the shame and the condemnation that is rightly ours, and then he takes them down into death, as if the old shameful us is crucified forever. And it's as he dies that we see the heart of God. Jesus really wanted Zacchaeus. He really wanted Shane Taylor. He really wants you, just as you are. It made him willing to give everything. And so that is a love that you can hang your life upon. As he rose from the dead, Jesus shows he is no ordinary man. He is the Son of God, God in the flesh, whose welcome of people like Zacchaeus personifies the welcome of his Father. Jesus' resurrection shows that there is life beyond death. Yes, our old self was crucified. Now risen to life forever, Jesus offers us new life with him. That means that Jesus' resurrection guarantees that not even death can separate us from his love. Jesus' love truly is a love that is stronger than death. Those who entrust themselves to him then really are reborn with a quality of life that not even physical death can rob. So Jesus' love will never let you go, as it sees what you're really like, as he opens your post-it notes, but also in all of life's up and downs, even as you take your final breath. That is a love that can set you free. So as we approach the end of Story Fortnight, may I ask, what about you? Listen, will you stop pretending? Will you come clean? You may not be as bad as Valjean or Zacchaeus, at least on the outside. But will you admit your need nonetheless? May crush your pride, but will you admit, I need life? I need Jesus. Will you drop the act? Will you come to Jesus? Will you embark on the adventure of being transformed as you rest in his love and as you follow him wherever he leads? Listen, we're at the end of a wonderful fortnight of events, and well done to the students who've put them all on. You may still have questions, and in a moment we're going to hear some ways of asking them, including a Zoom call that's shortly about to begin with me and some others. But I want to speak directly to those who, despite their questions, have seen enough of Jesus to ask for new life. What I'm going to do in a moment is say a prayer. The kind of prayer that a person says when they want to follow Jesus. And if at the end of this fortnight you've come to the conclusion that you need to entrust yourself to Jesus, this is the kind of prayer you can make your own. Suggest that you even just take a moment now to think whether this is a step that you might want to take. Do you want to receive new life from Jesus? Like Zacchaeus, like Shane Taylor, and like thousands of Cambridge students who over the decades have done so before you during their time as students. Do pray along with me now if you want to take this step. I'm going to pause at the end of each sentence, and if you want to make this prayer your own, I suggest you just echo it in the quiet of your heart. Let's pray. Dear God, sorry. I'm sorry that I have lived without you in the world. I recognize that I have treated you and others badly. I'm ashamed of who I've become. Thank you. Thank you that knowing every detail of my life, you were willing to send Jesus for me. Thank you that you love me enough to pay for my everlasting welcome. Please forgive me. Send your Holy Spirit so I might know the reality of your love and so I might live for you. Amen. Listen, God does not turn away any who approach him in this way. But if you have just embarked upon a journey with him, you will need some help. And so let me encourage you, if you prayed this prayer, I'd love you to just tell someone about the step that you've made. It could be me in the Zoom call, it could be a Christian friend that you trust. We see from Zacchaeus' own story that there's something really precious about declaring your new life in Jesus publicly. Why not nail the step you've made tonight to the mast of your heart by telling someone? That's the end of my input to story. I really hope we're able to cross paths at some point in the future. If we do ever meet each other, do come and say hi and say that you were watching in the Zoom call or perhaps sometime in the future. Thank you for being so kind in listening so well. And I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your time in Cambridge.
We're going to take a moment now to reflect more on what we've just heard as we listen to a spoken word written and performed by Dorothy and then Israel performing Amazing Grace.
I am clean, but I am not a day clean. Do you know that guilt? The 28 days early you finish your 30-day fitness journey. The dry January that seems to have encountered a tropical storm. That lie that lies in wait in your allies' mind as they ponder that one time you broke their trust. The day of self-hate that ruins the 1 year celebratory media post. The years of sobriety, obliterated by a communion glass of community down the pub. These lapses of time, of which we are so proud, but can shroud us in a gnawing and cloying guilt. You must climb the ticking clock. You must survive. You muck it up once, and the reward is dulled. Every day I sin. That is, I declare myself king, follow the incoming and outgoing tides and waves of my foolish heart, rather than the one who lords over it all, who loves over it all. Every day I make myself dirty, unfit for the purity of the one true deity. Every day I rebel and rebel. There is nothing to quell this spread of the greatest man-manufactured libellous dismissal of the great I am, declaring I am who I say I am, and that's sufficient. Every day I muck up. Every day I'd ruin the time of how long I can go before I disown my closest friend and saviour. Every day I stumble, fumble over the gift of God's good grace, but by the humbling of Jesus. Every day I am welcomed back with open arms outstretched further to collect the runaway daughter, a father who ought to push away those who push him away, but instead pursues you. I have been made clean, once for all, by the blood of Jesus, who came to save us, became the everyday dirty to be despised by men, and so my everyday dirty was dealt with on that cross as he hung there. As the only man who ever lived his whole life clean became dirt for me. I am not a day clean, but I am clean.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. The Lord hath promised good to me. His word my hope secures. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
And that's it. We've come to the end of Story. Thank you for joining me this evening and at our other events in the last 2 weeks. Now maybe something from tonight or the last fortnight has left you with some questions or things you just quite like to chat about. We've got a Zoom call happening right now as we finish off here. Pete, our speaker this evening, is going to be there along with some Cambridge students, and they would love to chat with you. So if you want to head over to that, the link for it is in the bio for this event. Or maybe you can get in touch with a Christian friend, especially if they invited you to the event this evening. You could ask them where they've experienced transformation in their lives as a result of knowing Jesus. And as tonight is our last event, we have a present for you. So if you head on over to our website at storycambridge.uk, and you can click on the tab at the top that says Get in Touch. There should be an option there for you to request a free copy of Making Sense of God by a Christian author called Tim Keller. It's a book that goes deeper into the Christian story and asks whether it really does satisfy our inmost feelings and longings. It's totally free and we'd be really happy to send you a copy. All the talks from Story will continue to be available there as well if you want to rewatch any of them later on. And this was our final event of Story. However, if you would like to continue digging into the Christian story in an online format like this, keep an eye out because we will be running an event on the 3rd of March. And if you can't wait that long, why not check out your college Christian union? You can find out who the reps for your college are through the Cambridge CU website, which is also linked below. They'd love to tell you what they're running online for your college this term. So thank you again for joining us tonight. I hope you found it to be encouraging. Good night.